Hello everyone, I am Siriji from Sri Venkateshwara College of Engineering, studying in 7th SEM, Department of Computer Science and Engineering. I am here to discuss about the topic Trends in Conservation of Different Energy Sources. Introduction. Trends in conservation of different energy sources are critical in our efforts to address climate change, promote sustainability, and ensure a reliable energy supply for the future. These trends reflect the growing awareness of the finite nature of fossil fuels, the environmental impact of energy production and consumption, and the need for a diversified, sustainable energy mix. In this discussion, we will explore the conservation trends for various energy sources. Coal. India has the third largest hard coal reserves in the world, roughly 12% of the world total, as well as significant deposits of lignite. Yet the deposits are generally of low quality, and India faces major obstacles to the development of its coal resource in a way that keeps pace with burgeoning domestic needs. In 2013, India produced almost 340 million tons of coal equivalent (MTCE), but it also imported some 140 MTCE, roughly 12% of world coal imports, 61% from Indonesia, 21% from Australia, 13% from South Africa. With a view to limiting reliance on imports, the government announced plans in early 2015 to more than double the country's coal production by 2020. The coal sector in India is dominated by big state-owned companies, of which Coal India Limited (CIL) is the largest, accounting for 80% of India's output. CIL has an unwieldy structure and is characterized by poor availability of modern equipment and infrastructure, and over-reliance on surface mining, and very low productivity from a very large workforce. Around 7% of national production comes from captive mining, that is, large coal consuming companies that mine for their own use. Private companies are not at present allowed to mine and market coal freely, though there are now some moves to open the coal market. At present, there are more than 90% of coal in India is produced by open cast mining. This method has relatively low production cost and is less dangerous than deep mining, but has a large adverse environmental footprint in the form of land degradation, deforestation, erosion, and acid water runoff. Among the other problems facing the Indian coal sector is a mismatch between the location of hard coal reserves and mines, which are concentrated in eastern and central India, and the high demand centers of the northwest, west and south. A ton of coal must travel on average more than 500 kilometers before it is converted to electricity, straining the country's rail network. There are also challenges related to the quality of the coal reserves. Most of the hard coal has low to medium calorific value and a high ash content. The low heat value means the more coal must be burned per unit of electrical output, leading to higher local emission. The ash content increases the cost of transporting coal, is corrosive, and lowers the efficiency and load factor of coal-fired power plants. In addition, most power plants are designed for a specific coal quality. If not available, operators may choose to blend different coal types, which can adversely impact the performance of the power plant, as the properties of blends can vary widely. Oil and oil products. India is one of the few countries in the world, alongside the United States and Korea, that rely on imports of crude oil while also being significant net exporters of refined products. Domestic crude oil production of just over 900,000 barrels per day is far from enough to satisfy the needs of 4.4 MB per day of refinery capacity. The output from the refinery sector, in turn, is more than enough to meet India's current consumption of oil products at around 3.8 MB per day, with the exception of LPG, for which India exports about half of domestic consumption. India has relatively modest oil resource, and most of the proven reserves, around 5.7 billion barrels are located in the western part of the country, notably in Rajasthan and in offshore areas near Gujarat and Maharashtra. The Assam-Arakan basin in the northeast is also an oil-producing basin and contains nearly a quarter of total reserves. Despite efforts to bolster oil production, including the opening of India's upstream sector to the non-state investors, the sector has underperformed. Key impediments to invest include the complex regulatory environment, including uncertainty over contract terms and pricing arrangements, and a resource base that is still not well explored and appraised. The upstream is still dominated by a few state-owned companies. About two-thirds of crude oil is produced by the Oil and Natural Gas Corporation Limited and Oil India Limited under a pre-liberalization nomination regime. Most of the remaining production comes from joint ventures with the national oil and gas companies and from blocks awarded under successive licensing rounds held under the new exploration licensing policy introduced in 1999. By contrast, the refining sector continues to strengthen. India has almost doubled its refining capacity in the last 10 years and has added more than 2 MB per day of new capacity since 2005 with strong private sector participation from companies such as Reliance and Essar. India is now fourth in the world in terms of total refining capacity, behind only the United States, China and Russia. India's refinery assets include the largest refinery in the world, Reliance Jamnagar complex with over 1.2 MB per day of throughput capacity, more than India's domestic crude production. These capacity additions have given India a surplus of refined products as the growth in oil product demand growth. Even at an impressive 4.2% average annual rate, has been slower than the capacity boom. The refining capacity expansion along with stagnant domestic crude oil output means that India has become the third largest crude oil importing country behind the United States and China. With about 3.7 MB per day of import requirement, overall India must import feedstock to meet 80% of its refinery needs for crude oil. The majority of ports that handle imported crude oil are located on the western side of India to accommodate oil tankers from the Middle East. The largest source of imports, Latin America and Africa. India has sought to diversify its sources of supply, especially as disruptions have plagued several of its suppliers such as Iran, Libya and Nigeria. The government announced in March 2015 a strategic aim to reduce reliance on imported crude by as much as 10% by 2022. The fall in the price of crude oil also has affected a cost-effective opportunity to build up emergency stockpiles of crude. With the expected completion of additional storage facility for the Strategic Petroleum Reserve expected in the late 2015, India will have a combined storage capacity of about 37 million barrels or roughly 10 days worth of crude imports. With refinery output exceeding total demand by roughly 1 MB per day, India is a net exporter of all refined products except LPG. India has been an important supplier of diesel to Europe and regular supplier of transport fuel to Asia, Pacific and Middle Eastern countries. Its exports come mainly from the private sector, refineries, Reliance and Essar, while the public sector refiners supply domestic market. Natural gas. Natural gas has a relatively small share, 6% of domestic energy mix. Optimism about the pace of expansion, fueled by some large discoveries in the early 2000s has been dashed by lower than expected output from offshore domestic field. The main onshore producing fields are in the states of Assam in the northeast, Gujarat in the west, and Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh in the south. Some of the most promising areas are offshore, including the Krishna Godavari basin of the east coast. The production record in recent years has been strongly affected first by the start of production at the much awaited KG-D6 offshore field in 2009 and then by its faster than expected decline because of reported subsurface complexity. This has contributed to an overall decrease in Indian gas output since 2011. Production of conventional gas reached 34 BCM in 2013 and was supplemented by LNG imports via 4 regasification terminals. The majority state-owned gas company, GAIL, is the largest player in the midstream and downstream gas market. In addition to conventional gas resource, India has also unconventional potential both from collabed methane (CBM) and shale gas. Commercial production at scale is still some way off, although CBM activity is starting to gain momentum with a number of private companies including Reliance and Essar stepping up their involvement. Hydropower. India has significant scope to expand its use of hydropower. Its current 45 gigawatt of installed capacity, of which over 90% is large hydro, represents a little under a third of the assessed resource. Much of the remaining potential is the north and northeast. A further 14 gigawatt are under construction. Although some of these plans have been delayed by technical or environmental problems and public opposition, if developed prudently, hydropower can bring multiple benefits as a flexible source of clean electricity and also means of water management for flood control, irrigation, and domestic uses. It can also enable variable and renewables to make a greater contribution to the grid. However, its development has lagged well behind thermal generation capacity, leading to a consistent decline in its share of total electricity output. Capacity addition and generation have routinely fallen short of its target set in successive government programs, while the objective of bringing in private investors has likewise proved difficulties to realize. High upfront cost, the need for long-term debt, which is quite limited in India's capital market, and consequent difficulties with financing have been a major impediment to realizing India's hydropower potential. Much of the potential is in remote areas, necessitating new long-distance transmission lines to bring much power to consumers. Adequate and efficient project planning and supervision is another hurdle, notably the challenge of the evaluation and monitoring environmental impacts, including long-term water availability and potential seismic risk, ensuring adequate public involvement and acceptance, and assessing the effect of multiple projects, often in different states, on individual river systems. Bioenergy. Bioenergy accounts for roughly a quarter of India's energy consumption, by far the largest share of which is the traditional use of biomass for cooking in households. This reliance gives rise to a number of problems, notably the adverse health effects of indoor air pollution. India is also deploying a range of more modern bioenergy applications, relying mainly on residues from its large agricultural sector. There was around 7 gigawatt of power generation capacity fueled by biomass in 2014. The largest share is based on bagasse, a byproduct of sugarcane processing, and a smaller share is cogeneration based on other agricultural residues. The remainder produce electricity via a range of gasification technology that use biomass to produce syngas, including small-scale thermal gasifiers that often support rural small business. Although modern bioenergy constitutes only a small share of energy use at present, India policy has recognized with the launch of a national bioenergy mission the potential for a modern energy to become a much larger part of the energy picture, especially in rural areas where it can provide a valuable additional source of income to farmers as well as power and process heat for consumers. Biofuels are another area of bioenergy development in India, supported by an ambitious blending mandate dating back to 2009 that anticipate a progressive increase to a 20% share of bioethanol and biodiesel by 2017. Implementation has thus far been slower than planned. The present share of bioethanol, mostly derived from sugarcane, remains well under 5%, and progress with biodiesel has been even more constrained. Wind and solar. From a low base, modern renewable energy, excluding hydropower, is rapidly gaining ground in India's energy mix as the government has put increasing emphasis on renewable energy, including grid-connected and off-grid systems. Wind power has made fastest progress and provides the largest share of modern non-hydro renewable energy in power generation to date. India has the fifth largest amount of installed wind power capacity in the world with 23 GW in 2014, although investment has fluctuated with changes in subsidy policies at national and state level. Key supporting measures have included a generation-based financial incentive, a payment per unit of output up to certain limits, and an accelerated depreciation provision. A scheme of renewable purchase obligation also exists, requiring that a certain percentage of all electricity should be sourced from wind, solar, and other renewable, but the operation of this scheme has been undercut and not enforced in some cases by financial state of many distribution companies. Solar power has played only a limited role in power generation thus far, with installed capacity reaching 3.7 GW in 2014, much of this added in the last 5 years. However, India began to put a much stronger emphasis on solar development with the launch in 2010 of the Jawaharlal Nehru National Solar Mission, the target of which was dramatically upgraded in 2014 to 100 GW of solar installation by 2022, 40 GW of rooftop solar photovoltaic, and 60 GW of large and medium scale grid connected PV project as a part of broader 175 GW target of installed renewable power capacity by 2022, excluding large hydropower. The dependence of national target on supportive action taken at state level is underlined by the fact that four states, Gujarat, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and Maharashtra, account for over three-quarters of today's installed capacity. Rooftop solar also has the potential to become a more important part of India's solar portfolio, particularly where it can minimize or displace expensive diesel-powered backup generation. Nuclear power. India has 21 operating nuclear reactors at 7 sites with a total installed capacity close to 6 GW. Another 6 nuclear power plants are under construction, which will add around 4 GW to the total. The operation of the existing nuclear fleet has been constrained in the past by chronic fuel shortages. In 2008, the average load factor was as low as 40%. This constraint was eased after India became a party to the Nuclear Suppliers Group Agreement in 2008, allowing access not only to technology and expertise but also reactor parts and uranium. The average plant load factor rose to over 80% in 2013. Though the current share of nuclear power in the generation mix is relatively small at 3%, India has ambitious plans to expand its future role, including a long-term plan to develop more complex reactors that utilize thorium, a potential alternative source of fuel for nuclear reactors. India has limited low-grade uranium reserves, but it has the world's largest reserves of thorium. Developing a thorium fuel cycle will though require a range of tough economic, technical, and regulatory challenges to be overcome. Conclusion. The conservation of different energy sources is essential for addressing the world's energy needs while mitigating environmental concerns. Fossil fuels are gradually giving way to cleaner alternatives and more efficient consumption practices. Renewable energy sources are experiencing rapid growth with a focus on maximizing their potential and minimizing their environmental impact. Nuclear energy is evolving to meet higher safety and standard and more effective waste management. Emerging energy technologies offer exciting possibilities for diversifying the energy mix and reducing environmental harm. In this ever-evolving landscape, the conservation of energy sources is a multifaceted effort guided by technological innovation, regulatory framework, and a growing global commitment to a sustainable energy future. Thank you.